Hey everyone, my name is Tyler King and this is my co-host Karen Maldonado, and we are back, yes, with Narcissist, Asking for a Friend podcast. And just so you know, we're bringing it in this season hot and heavy. So we're trying to get a positive approach to this to help people who are actually suffering in these relationships, and they need help. They need to know that they're not alone and that what they're going through, they are not going crazy or losing their mind, but there's actually legitimate concerns that are happening in their life. And Karen, you brought up such a great topic that we discussed about people who are, it maybe not necessarily a narcissist, but they can be emotionally distant or even immature. So I'm sure we have a lot of people who can relate to that and who have been in those situations and relationships. So Karen, have you had anyone that maybe, I know personally I have, because I've dealt with some situations, but like professionally, maybe in the past, you've probably counseled some people.
Well, I mean, there's a lot of different things that could spark in a relationship as far as arguing goes because of a, emotionally immature person in the relationship. Now you got to remember that any couple relationship, you've got two people that are imperfect. And I think I can think of times when I reacted to things in an emotionally immature way. I consider myself a mature person, but you're tired, you're having had a bad day already, your fuse is short.
Yes.
And you react to things maybe in a way that you're kind of not happy with after you think about it, right?
Of course.
So we can all do that. And your partner, if you're not in a narcissistic relationship, your partner could do that too. And, but you want to be able to get to a point where you can talk about it so that you can both see, oh yeah, that was kind of silly of me to behave that way. I'm sorry, but when you can get to the I'm sorries, then it's not a narcissistic relationship, right? Then it's just a normal relationship where you've got some tension that you've got to work through and you've got to learn from each other. And of course, we talk about this being a, Christian-based podcast, right? We like to, remember that, when we're being refined by the Lord, the Holy Spirit, when he's refining us, he will use our partner the most, the person that we spend the most time with.
Yes.
Refine us. And so we have to be willing to listen to what our partner is saying. If you're in a narcissistic relationship, that usually doesn't work. But, I do have people that I know from all over the world that have been listening to our podcast, and they make comments about, things. And I think it's important for us to also address the people that are listening, maybe for their sister who has a narcissistic husband, because you may also be married and have a good partner, but these kinds of things might pop up. And so we sometimes want to even address those things for people. And also listening to this might help you to, know, oh, what, my spouse does apologize. So I guess, even though there can be some emotional immaturity,
right,
they're not a narcissist, but this will be helpful for you then, so that you can, make some discernments about, what kind of conversations you might want to have with each other. Maybe you're relaxed for the evening and you're watching something on television and you lean toward your partner, but you're not received well. They're a little aloof to you, or maybe even you lean in and they get up, and that makes you feel a certain way, right? You feel like, oh, what did I do? I feel rejected, right? Try to talk about it in an emotionally stable situation. You should be able to say, hey, babe, when you did that made me feel like you were mad at me, or like you're not interested in me, or something's going on. What's going on? If that person can kind of lean in and listen to you and say, what made you feel that way? If they're willing to engage in a healthy way and find out why what they just did made you feel that way, then that's a good thing. But if they get angry at you when you tell them that they made you feel a certain way, there's something bad there, because now if they're angry at you for expressing your reaction to their behavior,
right,
and there's a problem there. So how do you deal with that? Let's just say that happened.
Do you bring it up right in the moment? Do you kind of wait, or are you gauging it by maybe the personality of your partner?
Yeah, probably gauging it by the personality of the partner, what's going on in their life at that moment. Are they going through a very hard, stressful time? But also, how long has this kind of behavior toward you been going on too? So if this is just like a fluke once in a,
like a one-off,
wild
right?
kind of thing, give them a little space and grace and see what happens. But if that continues, then you do need to address it, because this is not something that's healthy in the relationship. If you're not talking, you have to be able to feel safe talking to each other. So you then engage, and I would say don't engage in an accusatory way.
Right.
Be able to say, hey, is everything okay? You're not saying anything really about what just happened even.
Right.
And if they get up and then they say, yeah, what are you talking about? And if their attitude is really off, then I would say, okay, well, right at that moment, they're probably not ready to talk about it because they're still being very abrupt. And I think you probably need time to think about how you're going to talk about it. So you got to give yourself time and space, I think, as well. Because if you just right away react, they're already reacting in an irrational way toward you. Right. And that might get your dander up. And if that happens, then you're going to maybe want to react in a negative way toward them. You're better off just letting it slide, give them space. Your partner, if you've been together for a while, and give them some space. Now, in a narcissistic situation, people that are married or with a partner that is a narcissist, sometimes will tolerate that kind of behavior because they've learned the hard way that if they don't, then they receive rage.
Right.
Or they receive a silent treatment that doesn't end. And so, and I want our listeners too, if you have experienced this with a narcissist or maybe somebody that's not a narcissist, anything that we're saying here, and you want to, make some kind of comment in the comments, please do that. And when you do that, can you also tell us where you are coming from? It'd be interesting for us to just see where our listeners are from. And it's just, nice to see the engagement that we've been getting, that it's helping people. And we're so happy to hear that.
Yeah, and it's great that you're educating, the listeners that are in this relationship, because a lot of times we can want to answer right now, and we have to maintain our emotional stability and regulate our own maturity in these relationships, because you may want to answer right now, but if that person does not have the capacity to give you an answer right now, or you notice they're being short, I'm glad you're saying, hey, you may need to wait to a different time to kind of bring it up again when they're a little more calm, versus just trying to get the answer that you want right now because you're feeling a certain kind of ways.
And if they are just really going through a lot of things that has nothing to do with you, and they're taking it out on you, not intentionally, but they're just overwhelmed or whatever. If you feel like a safe space for them to talk, by not becoming offended easily and giving it some time, them some time, they may come to you and open up. Now, in a narcissistic situation, probably not.
Right, exactly.
We can hope for it, but it may not happen. So, but it's worth trying. I would say it's worth trying with any and all situations that you find yourself in. So
yeah, I think it's worth it too, because you want to see what kind of responses you're going to get, because remember, you're looking at this over time. We're not looking at the one-offs here and there. We're looking at over time. Are they consistently, well, it's nothing, or whatever the reaction is? We want to see, are they consistently acting like that? And how do you determine, because sometimes a narcissistic person and a person who's emotionally mature can sometimes react in the same way. So how do you differentiate when it's one or the other?
You know the person by now, if they are usually most times emotionally mature in their responses to you, and more on the positive side than the negative, then I would say you're probably, going to be okay to give them time and, address it later. In a situation where, this person has been abusive in the way that they've treated you already. this is just part of their head games then, and you know, they're taking it out on you, and whether things are good or not in their life, they'll take things out on you. And so you just kind of have to know your person, right? And
Right. Yeah.
that does take time. If it's a new relationship and if that kind of behavior is continuous, and if you're not married, now's a good time to think about, you know, making some changes in your own life for yourself, because you have the power to do that right now. But in an abusive situation, we would say, especially if you're dating, get out now. If you're married, sometimes separation is necessary, because separation will sometimes be the thing that will wake that person up to know, I am not going to be your enabler. If you're going to continue to behave like this, I can't allow this for myself. I need peace. You know, we really do have to make sure that we surround ourselves in relationships that create peace and don't take our peace away.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Because without your peace, you're pretty much probably going to end up in a depression. It's not going to end well for you emotionally, mentally,
Yes.
Or anything else. When a person finds themselves in that space where they're with a person and they are not responding to them well, and they're dating you, you're saying, hey, this may be a good time to evaluate if this is the kind of thing I want, you know, long term in my life, and this is a great time to kind of maybe even move out of that. But if you're married, then I like the steps that you brought up, that separation may help to kind of get them to understand the reality of how severe the situation is. Because in a way, if you stay, and I can say this from personal experience, if you stay, it does not necessarily get better without them taking any accountability or any type of treatment, therapy, or something or if they don't even acknowledge that what they're doing is wrong. It's actually only making it worse, and it's just going to traumatize you even further. And it's almost like mentally you got to be careful, because the more you're diminished, degraded, you know, told a lot of verbal abuse and emotional abusive language, you almost start to internalize it and believe it, and you start to operate as if you are nothing, as if you are not enough and not worthy. And that can mess with your overall psyche, you know what I mean? And how you view yourself. And it can make it even that much harder to leave, because now when you've kind of been broken down so bad to feel like you're nothing, now you almost feel like, well, now I can't live without this person. I can't be without this person. And they could be severely abusive to you and maybe even escalating the abuse.
Right. That's exactly right, Tyler. You hit it on the head there. People will become almost like addicted to this relationship. That reminds me of a book. I talked about this book in the past. Lovecraft. Yeah, and it talks about, you know, a guide to kicking an addiction to toxic love. So it's almost like you become addicted to that person, because now you think you really need them. You know, they've torn you down so much that I must need this person because they're the only one that's sticking with me. Meanwhile, they're the one that's isolated you from everybody else.
Right.
Yeah.
You've lost all your self-worth, your value, identity. And then because they've severed so many of your relationships that kind of kept you lifted up, they are the only one now in your life that you have to lean on. So now you even feel like more like I got to hold on to this because they're all I got. And really, they were the ones that were strategic in severing all your relationships to make sure that they were the center of your world so that you couldn't leave. So it was really kind of a trap.
It is. And when you're saying all that too, I'm thinking about even in situations where it's maybe a narcissistic parent with a child.
Oh, wow. Yes.
Yeah. Because, you know, the parent makes the kid think that without me in your life, you know, you're not going to do well, or you need me. And if they try to put this feeling in the kid that they have, you know, they don't have the ability to do life without that parent. And sometimes parents they'll use money sometimes to you know, make that child feel like, you know, you need me, you know, because it's the control thing, right? If they have something that they know the kid is dependent on from them, then they can withhold love and give love depending on how the kid performs. So it's all performance-based love, right?
Yes.
And then that creates in that kid a sense of shame when they're not doing things exactly perfect, right? And so it's just, yeah, it's like it's an addiction to,
Yeah.
and it could be a parent, it could be a spouse, it could be just a partner, it could.
And it can make someone end up being codependent, whereas normally they would, you should teach your children to be able to be more independent. Like you're raising them up, and as they're getting older, you're teaching them to be able to get out on their own. But if they're doing things to make you need them, and so they can have that control. And if anyone out there has been in that situation, chime in the chat and let us know, because we want to be able to help you, because you may not have realized that that's what was happening all your life. But now that we're having this conversation, you're like, yeah, my mom or dad did do this to me. Like they did make me feel like I was nothing and that I needed them for everything, and kind of kept me trapped in, especially maybe if they were, people that were very established in wealth, and, they may have used that to control you because they had a wealth. So, so Karen, speak to that. How does a person, if they have been beaten down to the point where they feel like they cannot do life on their own, because maybe that person could have been like a child that was, that didn't have a choice because they were dependent on a parent, or maybe a woman that was a stay-at-home mom. And there's rare situations where there are stay-at-home dads, but, someone that ended up becoming dependent on this other person for their needs. And now they're realizing, wow, this isn't the greatest situation and I need to do something about it. What can they do to start getting their autonomy back and getting their life back?
They do need, well, one thing I would say is, seek a professional counselor so that you can kind of, navigate through life now, knowing that you have some goals that you want to accomplish, right? What are those goals going to look like? Well, to get so that you're not financially dependent, you're going to have to make a plan. And what's that going to look like? How do I get from A to B? A, right now being dependent on them financially, to B, becoming independent financially. So that would mean, there's got to be a plan. How do you get this? You need somebody to kind of help you work through that. It may mean, going back to school to get a job so that you can get the finances that you need so that you can continue to have maybe the lifestyle that you're used to, whatever it may be. I've had situations where these were lifestyles that were, pretty wealthy, and then the wife in this case, and most of the time when I worked with clients, it was the husband that was the narcissist and the wife was the stay-at-home mom, kind of secluded from the rest of the world. And so now, a lot of fear, he's going to take my kids away. I won't have any financial stability myself. He's going to kick me out of our big house, and I'm not going to have a car, and he's going to take everything away from me. So, but if she makes a plan for herself, she can, gradually get there. It's not going to be an overnight thing. And if he's got the money to fight you for custody and that kind of thing, it could be an ugly mess. So you do have support. You don't want to go through something like that all by yourself. And support, I would say professional support, but then also you need to get your connections with people that may have actually been broken. It could be family members, things like that, because of him. Or her. In this case, it could be her. You need to get, back in contact with those people, and you need to let somebody know your plan.
That's right.
Getting independently stable financially. So I need, people to know that that's what I'm doing. And then you also need to keep people informed if things feel like they are escalating and becoming more unsafe, because one person that you're with, they're going to know, oh, something's up here. She's getting, going back to school. They usually don't like that either. They don't want you to get, yourself healthy. So
that's a red flag right there. If they oppose anything that you're doing to get well or better, or to esteem yourself. Right. Wow.
So, and that could be, like you said, it could be a parent too. So wealthy parents connect, and I've had people come see me because of wealthy parents, that they felt that they needed, but then they, also were controlled by them. And so, that's not a good situation either. And then another thing too, with control of a parent, it could be a parent that's very unhealthy and maybe doesn't have a lot of money, and they just make the somehow they're able to make their child feel like the parent needs them so much. And they've been groomed as children to feel like that parent needs me, I can't let them down. Meanwhile, that parent may be a mess. That parent may, be so dependent on them for emotional security. Just by showing up. And it could be that parent is a very unhealthy person to be around. So, people need to really think about, am I allowing toxicity in my relationship? Now, I'm not saying that you should write off a parent if the parent is not a danger to you.
Right, exactly.
What I am saying is, as a Christian, you want to love them, pray for them, and witness to them when you can. But remember, if you want to keep your peace, you're going to have to be smart about making boundaries that are healthy. So that's.
Healthy boundaries, honoring them, even with the boundaries. And I think that's a great thing, because we find ourselves, if we're not careful, allowing people to have more control than they normally should, because we don't want to offend. We feel like we don't want to let them down, or maybe they'll say, well, you're not there for me, and try to guilt trip you. But, don't fall for that,
Right, because then that goes back to that shame, right? That shame that they feel, especially words like that from a parent. That becomes like a shame thing. Oh, I'm not gonna, because we still as adults will look oftentimes to our parents for that thumbs up in what we're doing, right?
Exactly, that approval, because we need it even when we're older. If your parents are still living, you still want that approval, and and it's interesting, because there are some parents that will, like you said, when the dynamics aren't healthy or their parents are emotionally immature or narcissistic, they can do things to withhold that. They know you did a good job, let's say, and instead of telling you that you did a good job, they just choose not to even acknowledge your accomplishments, achievements, and you almost have to beg and almost tell them hey, I did this and did that, just to get them to acknowledge it. And they just purposely don't want to give you that edification.
Yes, because it's not about them.
Right. It's not about them. Wow, Karen, this was such a great conversation. I feel like there was so much that we talked about here. What lasting thoughts do you want to leave with our viewers that may find themselves in a situation where they're dealing with a person who's emotionally immature? They're having these conversations. They notice that the person is not being very responsive, and what would be the next step after they've kind of talked to them? They're not really getting what they need as far as a good response as to why they're acting that way. Maybe they even notice some other suspicious things. Do they, in that moment, need to just kind of just stop and take an assessment and just say, you know what, I don't know if this is where we need to go as far as looking at it. And I want you to look at it from a person who is married, and then a person who is dating. And then also we're going to touch on the parent. And that way our viewers can have next steps if they're in either of those categories.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'll start with the parent one. The parent one is pretty simple. If you don't live under the roof with them, I would just say, creating more boundaries in your life with them. Now, can you create boundaries under the same roof with someone that you're dependent on? It's hard, because if they're your parent, then you kind of have to answer to them.
Yes.
And you got to go by their rules, right? Because you're dependent on them. So I'm not saying it's a hopeless case, but you got to start making plans for yourself on how you're going to move ahead in life and be successful without this person dragging you down, because that is what they're going to continue to do. You've got to figure out a way to get out. And if you're a healthy person, you can get a job, you can have your schooling if you need schooling, or there's a lot of training online that you can get for things that you could, get some experience so that you can put resumes out and learn. So many opportunities are online. So, the internet can be good for some things. So Yeah, I would definitely look at that. If you are married to the person, it's a little bit harder. If you're a Christian, you made a covenant relationship with this person, and so, but like I said, separation. If you cannot talk to this person and they are just being stubborn and not apologetic, and you've even talked to some people maybe for support system type thing, whether it's professional or family members, and everyone agrees that this is not good behavior, then you need to let some people know your plan on getting, I would say, getting separated until the person is willing to go for help. If you're married, marriage counseling. If you're dating, I would really suggest, if it's that difficult in the relationship to talk to this person, that's a red flag that you probably just need to really see clearly and ask the Lord for wisdom. Because I would think if this is an ongoing problem that you have with this person, then you need to just pray that the Lord would give you wisdom on how to handle making a boundary with that person, so that they know you're no longer available until they can make some changes and start to see things from your perspective and how they make you feel. So, if they're not interested in how they make you feel when they hurt you, that's before marriage, it's not going to get better.
And then I'm just going to throw this out there because it just came into my spirit. And if you are a believer and you're dealing with an unbeliever in this situation, that's even more of a reason to really be praying about it. Just why would you want to continue to be one? You're not even in alignment when it comes to your beliefs, and then now you have this added factor in there. It just doesn't seem like I could see that getting better. So. It's just something to think about. And then also touching on this one last thing, and we may need to go into another episode about this in another topic or way, but as we're closing out, what do you say to a person that, you have stay-at-home moms or stay-at-home husbands, or situations where that may call for that, or the person may want the person to do that? Do you feel that is I guess there could be a teetering line with that, because it puts you in a position where now you don't have, you're kind of putting your job skills on hold, and like your workforce kind of longevity in a place, and you're trusting this person to provide for you. But sometimes things cannot end well. I'm not saying that it's like that for everyone, but then now, if you've been the person that has been out of the workforce for a long time under this, a mutual agreement, then you can be on the short end of the stick. Do you feel like sometimes it's always good to have something, maybe that you're doing employment wise, or maybe staying engaged in community wise, or volunteering, or doing something where you're keeping your skill level and skill set up and your networking connections going?
Especially if you're seeing that you're in a relationship that kind of does have red flags. You maybe didn't realize it before you married the person, but now it's like, oh, this is. And I have had people come in my office and said it was beautiful until we got married. The day we got married, when it changed. So that does happen. So,
unfortunately.
Yeah. So if that is the case, then I would say, keep yourself growing in every
marketable.
Yeah. And as we age, it's always good to be learning something new that's good for the brain.
Right.
You should be always trying to better yourself in every area.
You got to keep yourself engaged. Don't leave yourself open so that you are so vulnerable that now you may have a really bad situation. But you know what, Karen, I really love this topic. Don't forget to like it, subscribe to the channel. We want to help as many people as possible. And this is Narcissist, I'm Asking for a Friend podcast. And we thank you. We'll see you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.